Weather right now. We're still in the middle of May into June, which traditionally is the coldest month.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's begin with your news. And at the desk this morning, we say good morning to Jualane Tulongwete.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. A spokesperson for Germany's foreign ministry has called the accusations that Berlin's ambassador to Kampala is involved in disruptive activities in the East African country absurd and without any merit. The accusations against Matthias Schauer came after he reportedly raised concerns about Army Chief General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is the president's son, at a meeting last week. Rights groups have long accused the Ugandan government of targeting the opposition, especially in the run-up to the elections in January next year. Uganda's military has now cut all military cooperation with Germany. South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema has accused the Mkhonto weSizwe party leader Jacob Zuma of being pretentious about his call for black unity. This follows Zuma's long-standing call for unity against black and like-minded parties. In its formative stages, the MK party worked with the EFF and formed the Progressive Caucus in Parliament, but the relations of the two parties soured with the departure of EFF's former Deputy President Floyd Shivambu, who is now the MKP's Secretary General, together with Dalimbo Mzwanele Mangi and advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, among others. Malema brands the MKP as his enemy, saying he will never work with a party that seeks to destroy the EFF.
We will never unite with Zuma, who wants to kill the EFF. Whether Trump says the same thing about the two of us, we don't care. We must never be tempted to unite with the agents who want to destroy the EFF. If Zuma Batla unity of black people, why did he form MK when there was EFF? There is no unity they are talking about. They are pretentious about it. Zuma is about himself and about his family. That's why he went to form that Spaza show.
The South African National Defence Force, or SANDF, has dismissed a report by a newspaper article that its members withdrawing from the Democratic Republic of Congo are to surrender their weapons whilst transiting through Rwanda. It says this article must be condemned in the strongest possible terms as nothing but hearsay. Didaba Tsodetsi has the story.
In a statement, the SANDF says that this article is not factual and appears to be aimed at creating panic and discrediting all involved. It also says that this reporting compromises the safety of the troops. And the SANDF says that the author of this story did not verify the facts with the authorities. SANDF troops are withdrawing from the DRC after an agreement was reached by SADC and the East African Community to allow peace processes to resume.
The M23 rebels fighting in eastern DRC say former President Joseph Kabila has arrived in the regional capital, Goma, ending a period of self-imposed exile. The government in Kinshasa has accused Kabila of being linked to the M23 rebels. Last week, the Senate lifted his immunity from prosecution so he can be tried for treason. The BBC's Will Ross has the story.
Joseph Kabila is somewhat vulnerable now that he no longer has immunity from prosecution, so moving to a rebel-held part of eastern Congo would make it extremely hard for the authorities to arrest and try the former president for treason. Last week, Mr. Kabila said his number one priority was removing what he called the dictatorship, so it's possible that a man long seen as close to Rwanda is joining the Kigali-backed M23 rebels as part of a push to try to topple President Felix Tshisekedi. There's a danger that would trigger a wider conflict, drawing in neighbouring countries on opposing sides.
And finally, Israel says a controversial aid mechanism bypassing the UN and charities has begun operating in the Gaza Strip following the resignation of its head. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation will employ private American security contractors to oversee a process where selected Palestinians will pick up food for their families from distribution points. Juliet Toma is Director of Communications at the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA.
We fundamentally oppose this a new plan that we understand is supported by both the governments of Israel and the United States, that there is a system in place that we can use, including through UNRWA, Why reinvent the wheel? The needs are known to everyone. We need to get in 500, 600 trucks of supplies every single day. That can only be done through the United Nations under the leadership of UNRWA.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And in our sports headlines this hour, Amajita head coach Raymond Mdaga is targeting the last 16 of the FIFA Under-17 World Cup later in the year. And the president of the motor racing industry is standing again for the next presidency. I will be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Every morning after the 6 o'clock news, we try to bring you a concise roundup of the news and events that took place across the continent in the past 24 hours, all in a bid to keep you informed very precisely. And we use our team of reporters, analysts, and experts to provide the context for you to keep you informed. And we begin what we call the Africa Roundup with this news. As the world is facing a myriad of challenges, the African Development Bank continues to support member states. The bank is hosting its annual meetings in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. A number of leaders are expected to attend the annual event. The African Development Bank's Director General for Southern Africa is Munu Mupotula.
These meetings are very, very important. We meet annually to discuss the progress that the bank has made over the past year. And this year we're looking at Africa's capital, making Africa's capital work for Africa. And also pivotal this year is also, as you know, the election of the new president. So the bank is helping countries, and I think it's very important, given the circumstances, to start looking inwards. You know, whether it's domestic resource mobilization or whether it's trying to see how we can trade amongst each other through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Agricultural scientists from G20 member states have converged in the South African town of Polokwane for a summit aimed at reducing food insecurity. Scientists and policymakers will deliberate on scientific innovations to ensure sustainable farming amid the global warming challenge. Chief Scientist at South Africa's Agricultural Research Council, Dr. Lerato Matsaunyane, has more.
So in terms of our contribution as the Agricultural Research Council, we were tasked with the various issues that we had to lead with. And this includes the transformation of agricultural food systems. We are looking at biodiversity, climate change and risk management, as well as bioeconomy within the agricultural sector. But we did not have these discussions in a silo format. This is where we then had our concept notes that we drafted, following which we engaged all scientists within the different sectors. We started with discussions, obviously, within the Agricultural Research Council. We then diverged to scientists and community members within the agricultural sector in West Africa, in East Africa, in Northern Africa, including Southern Africa. And this is where it shows that as we exceed in agricultural research, it is not only for South Africa, but we're looking at the African continent as a whole.
Now, the 2025 Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium kicked off in Cape Town on Monday, bringing together key stakeholders, experts and decision makers to advance critical infrastructure projects across South Africa. The symposium, a flagship initiative of the South African Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, has also attracted 14 infrastructure ministers from different African countries. South Africa's Public Works and Infrastructure Minister is Dean McPherson.
This symposium is so focused on project preparation and project preparation financing because we have seen, and the empirical evidence is there now, to say that unless projects are adequately prepared and packaged and that the money exists to do that, there's a high likelihood that projects are not going to take off. So that's one of the key themes that we are bringing out of here today. We have seen a commitment of 600 million rand to project preparation and financing through Infrastructure South Africa.
And finally, until the last decade, the majestic lesser flamingo had 4 African breeding sites: a salt pan in Botswana and Namibia, a soda lake in Tanzania, and an artificial dam outside South Africa's historic diamond mining town of Kimberley. Now it only has 3. Nyima Pratton has more.
Years of sewage spills at Kamfers Dam, South Africa's only large flamingo breeding site, turned the water toxic and drove the birds away. Lesser flamingos are listed as near threatened by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. There are about 2 to 3 million left, most of them in Africa and the rest in South Asia. But their numbers are falling fast, and losing one of their last few breeding sites has made it worse. Wetlands expert Esther van der Westhuizen-Koetser told Reuters that flamingos need the right conditions to breed.
The big problem for the species is they will not be able to breed at Kamfers Dam until the levels of the water returns to normal conditions for them to breed. So we will be continuing to miss out on breeding seasons that deliver between 2,000 and 5,000 chicks in a breeding season until that can be sorted out.
All right, and that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news, keeping you up to date, always right here on Rise and Shine. Coming up shortly, Asanda will be taking us to East Africa, and we'll get a sense of what's in the news in that region, including stories of torture by police. Shocking. That's in Kenya. That's all coming up.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K,
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Estamos
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
15 minutes past 6 Central African time. Good morning. If you've just joined us, let's thank the team now for just a little bit. Hlengiwe Mabaso, Joey Likhodi and Pumuzo Ramagadza are on our production. On technical production is Nanda Koza. Social media is Talent Butelezi. On news is Jwalane Tulo Mwepe. On economics news, Nosipho Zuma. And on sports is Fikile Lingwati. That's our team on Africa Rise and Shine. Now, let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines in the East Africa. And we're joined on the line by Kenyan journalist and founder of Association of Grassroots Journalists Kenya, Dennis Beru. Dennis, how are you on this Tuesday?
I'm fine. Hope you are doing well in South Africa. How is everything in South Africa?
Everything is good so far. Just a little bit cold, but we're surviving.
Yeah, actually, same here in Kenya. A bit of cold, but at the end of the day, we have to really do what we are supposed to do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for making time for us. We always love having these catch-up sessions. Very important to know. Let's start today with the detention and torture of Kenyan prominent civil society activist Boniface Mwangi in Tanzania. We have touched on this earlier in the show. He was held for 4 days before being dumped at the border. What can you tell us?
Thank you so much. Of course, the issue of Boniface Mwangi being tortured in Tanzania has been an issue that we've been talking about it for the last 2 weeks and so. And according to the Tanzanian authorities, that people who have they said that people invaded the country to make noise, and they had to arrest and deport them. But the manner in which Boniface Mwangi was deported back to Kenya was actually inhumane. I remember he was. It is alleged that he was dropped at the border between Kenya and Tanzania. That is Horohoro border, and it is also alleged that he was transported by road from Dar es Salaam. That is so many miles from Dar es Salaam to the Kenyan border. That is the coastal region of Kenya. And during the 3-day ordeal, as per the conversation from Boniface Mwangi, the activist, he said that he was really tortured, he was beaten, he was being asked, a lot of questions. At the same time, he was being beaten. It is also alleged that Boniface Mwangi, for the 3 days he was in detention of his captives, he didn't even take anything, even water. So these has really brought tension, diplomatic tension between Kenya and Tanzania. But remember, the Kenyan authorities, that is through the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Musalia Mudavadi, refuted the claims and saying that, the countries have their own policies and laws. So it is really sad for Kenyan people to go to Tanzania and start activism there, saying that, Kenya has been so lenient on these leaders, on these activists. They've been given space to bring out the issues, but when it is the issue of Tanzania, so they have to follow the rules in those particular countries, and that is what has really been happening in Kenya. Boniface Mwangi was brought here, and he got medical attention at the coastal region, and later he was airlifted to Nairobi for further medical attention.
Talking about having to respect the rules in one's country and that how those could differ from one's home country, the president of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan, saying that she wouldn't tolerate outsiders coming into the country and meddling, using that word in inverted commas, into the country's affairs. In the case of Mwangi, and there's also Ugandan activist Agathe Atuhaire, was it meddling in your view, or were they just simply trying to show solidarity for opposition leader Tundu Lissu?
Yes, on the issue of the Ugandan activist and lawyer Agatha Atuhaire, it is the same issue, but for our issue is extraordinary because it is also alleged that the lawyer was tortured to a point of being raped, and this is according to the conversation that she had with the members of the media. Same story, same scenario. She was also dropped at the border between Tanzania and Uganda, and she was in a very bad state of mind. She was tortured and to a point of being raped, as per the sentiment with the members of the public. Still, Ugandan authority have not responded to these allegation, or rather the detention of Agatha Atwaire, who is a top lawyer from Uganda. Now, the point is, if we remember, East Africa signed the East African Peace Accord. We are a community. We are one community. We are free to move from one country to another. But why is this happening when activists from these countries are going to Uganda in solidarity or to represent the opposition leader Tundu Lissu, who is in jail facing charges of treason. Another point is Tanzania trying to silence the activist from that particular country. Remember, in the recent past, we've seen so many activists from Tanzania being silenced. I remember we are at a very crucial point where Tanzania is preparing for the elections in October. So we are still waiting to see whether the captors of the two activists will be arrested and arraigned in court. Because remember, issues around rape is a very serious crime in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda, and all over the world.
Yes, as it should be. And over and above Tanzania, in his home country, Mwangi is known to be a campaigner against corruption. President William Ruto filed a defamation lawsuit against him. He's also stood in the 2017 general elections in Kenya. So he's definitely ruffled some feathers in terms of the Kenyans' political circle. Can we see a connection in terms of that also to what we've seen him endure in this torture?
Of course, that is true. Boniface Mwangi has been the most critic of the recent regimes. Even during the late President Mwai Kibaki, he was vocal about the issues around corruption. During President Uhuru Kenyatta, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, Boniface Mwangi was also a critic of the government, criticized the government on issues to do with corruption and also the issues around violation of human rights per se, the activist. Of course, this is in connection with the elections. I remember he's also a big critic of the recent regime, that is William Ruto's regime, and people feel, of course, there is a connection. Remember, President Mama Samia Suluhu and President William Ruto, they are friends. They've been talking, and people on the corridors, they are saying, of course, why is it that Boniface Mwangi and the Ugandan activist Agatha Atwaire were denied entry, and also former Chief Justice Willie Mutunga was denied, but the recently or the retired Chief Justice that is David Maraga was allowed to go and represent and see Tundu Lissu. Remember, David Maraga is not a critic of government, but why was he allowed to go and enter Tanzania and to appoint? He even attended the court sessions. So people say, oh, of course, yes, now we know you do not want Boniface Mwangi because he is a critic of your government. He's criticizing issues around corruption. And David Maraga, a former Chief Justice, he was allowed to enter into Tanzania. So the whole point is corruption, and also the position where he sits, that he has been a critic of government for so many years, especially this government. Remember, during the Gen Z, it was at the forefront of the Gen Z demos.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting because, as we said earlier, Martha Karua was also arrested on 18 May for wanting to show support for Tundu Lissu, Agathe Atuhaire, who's saying she was raped in Tanzania, also found in the border of her country with Tanzania. In terms of what this will mean for Kenya's next elections, there's a lot of activism around corruption and how politics are being run in the East Africa. But now the U.S. is demanding to get answers from Tanzania about the detention, the torture, the rape of these activists. If no one else is receiving answers from Tanzania, is the U.S. the better guy to put pressure for these answers?
Thank you so much, Asanda. Of course, if we see pressure piling from the U.S., we might see some serious action taking place or being taken by the Tanzanian authorities. I remember the U.S. Bureau of African Affairs, which is now under the U.S. State of Department, through their X post last Friday, saying that they're really deeply concerned by reports of mistreatment of the two East African activists, that is Agatha and also Boniface Mwangi. Yes, and this coming from U.S., of course, we know U.S. government has been leading in terms of trying to ensure that people's rights are not being violated, and of course, we might see a response from the Tanzanian authority on the same, because Kenyan government, as I said, earlier, they are speaking the same language with the Tanzanian government. So we do not even expect to see or to hear any statement from their counterparts in Tanzania. But of course, we might see the U.S. piling more pressure on the same to see whether the perpetrators, especially on the issues around rape allegation, are brought to books. Remember, these are very serious crime, and we also had, the sentiments of the Amnesty International, that is the regional director for East and Southern Africa, Mr. Tigere Chaguta, who also raised their concerns of the torture on the inhumane the two activists went through. So, Asanda, we are hoping that this pressure will be piled on the Tanzanian authority, especially President Samia Suluhu. And remember, people around East Africa, they really had a lot of hopes in Mama Samia Suluhu's presidency. I remember during the late John Pombe Magufuli's regime, we had the same issues around activists being arrested and tortured. So they expected, because she is a woman, of course, we might see change, but this is not coming. So let's wait and see whether the Bureau of African Affairs will still pile pressure on, more pressure on Tanzanian authorities to ensure that the perpetrators
those questions are answered.
Arrested.
Well, we leave it there for today. Thank you so much, Dennis, and you have a great Tuesday.
Thank you so much, Asanda.
Dennis Beru is Kenyan journalist and founder of the Association of Grassroots Journalists, Kenya. That's our East Africa wrap at 6:31 Central African Time. Let's say good morning to Jwalani Tulongwebe with news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the former African Union ambassador to the U.S., Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao, says the treatment given to South Africa at the White House serves as a reminder to African leaders that the game has changed and that they need to re-strategize when approaching the U.S. This follows last week's meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump, which aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. A spokesperson for Germany's foreign ministry has called the accusations that Berlin's ambassador to Kampala is involved in disruptive activities in the East African country absurd and without merit. And finally, British police say an incident in which a car ploughed into crowds at the victory parade for Liverpool Football Club is not connected to terrorism. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, time now to get an African perspective on what's been happening in the world of sport, as we say. Good morning to Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Let's start off with football news this hour. The African Under-17 national team men's coach Vela Khumalo says coming out of the group stage at the FIFA Under-17 World Cup is a realistic target following the draw on Sunday. Amajimbos were drawn alongside host Qatar, Italy and Bolivia. A tournament set to be held from the 3rd until the 27th of November features 48 teams. It starts with 12 groups of 4 teams, with the top 2 advancing to the knockout phase, joined by the 8 third-best placed teams. From there, it becomes a knockout tournament from the last 32 to the final, and Khumalo feels this is realistic.
I think in this case, the fact that we're in the World Cup is a new chapter altogether. Now we need to get over that. We are at the World Cup. We worked for this World Cup, and it cannot just be in the World Cup. I think the next target it will be, we want to go to the group stage. We want to, remember here it's the World Cup. Iron, sharpen and iron. So we really want to come out of the group stage and perhaps go for the knockouts and see how far can we go.
Preparations for the World Cup are going to be very important, and Khumalo, who has been in Qatar for 4 days now, says the preparations for the draw have been easier, allowing them to meet other nations and possibly negotiate for international friendly matches.
Organize ourselves against each other, having friendlies. But however, you just never know. You know, it is not just an easy thing. You think of the tickets, flight, you think of all the budget and the plans that we actually had, but the most important thing is the execution, and the execution means extra money, salaries for staff, the flights, and all other things for a good preparation in playing teams that actually in the World Cup. And again, it's all about exposing our kids.
In tennis news, Emma Raducanu battled through illness to win on her French Open return and set up a second-round meeting with defending champion Iga Swiatek. The British number 2 earned a 7-5, 4-6, 6-3 victory against China's Wang Xinyu, despite needing to see the doctor on court towards the end of the first set. Raducanu, ranked 41st in the world, is making only her second appearance at Roland Garros after missing the past 2 tournaments with injury. Raducanu can now focus on how to cause a shock against 4-time French Open champion Swiatek, who cruised past Slovakia's Rebeka Sramakova 6-3 and 6-3. And in football news again is that the former Manchester United boss Erik ten Hag has been appointed as manager of Bayer Leverkusen on a 2-year contract. A 55-year-old Dutchman replaces Xavi Alonso, who left Leverkusen to join Real Madrid. Ten Hag has been out of a job since getting sacked by United in October, with the Old Trafford club languishing 14th in the Premier League table. And in motor racing, the president, Mohammed bin Sulayman, will stand for a second 4-year term as FIA president in December, saying he would welcome any rival candidate and that he is on a mission to grow motorsport and make Formula One's governing body stronger. Speaking to the media at the Emirates, he had taken the decision, which was widely assumed after conferring with members of the International Automobile Federation. He said he was proud of what he had been achieved under his mandate and saw no reason to do anything differently second time around. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Celebrate unity, progress, and pride with Channel Africa this Africa Month.
Nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Africa,
Listen in on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10.
All right, first economics update for Rise and Shine on this Tuesday, the 27th of May, is by Nosipho Zuma. Let's say good morning to her.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news, the SAWA, South African's Deputy Public Works Minister, Sihle Zikalala, says it is satisfying that Treasury is fast tracking the issue of regulations. He says this will guide how to implement and ensure that the private sector plays a role in funding infrastructure. Zikalala was speaking at the 2025 Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium in Cape Town in the Western Cape Province.
We are happy that the Treasury is fast-tracking the issue of regulations that will guide on how to implement and ensure that the private sector plays a role in funding infrastructure, even the public infrastructure. The ownership will remain with the state. We will want to see private sector investing for a particular time, then hand over to the state. That's how some of the triple Ps work, like build, operate, and transfer. Once there is unsolicited bid, it is always proper to test the market.
Meanwhile, the UK's Trade Commissioner for Africa, John Humphrey, says the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium offers London the opportunity to connect, network and share experience. Humphrey is part of the delegates attending the 3-day gathering in Cape Town. The meeting seeks to attract private partnerships with the government. Humphrey articulates the UK's position.
And clearly, obviously, at the end of the day, that UK companies can contribute to, or UK investors can contribute to, and which deliver things for people. So I think in Africa as a whole, I mean, there's a lot of evidence to show that infrastructure is what's required to drive economic growth and prosperity. You know, whether that's a school child who can't get to their school because there's no bridge over the river, or somebody can't get their products to market, or somebody who's living out in the country can't get into a city for their job. So infrastructure delivers growth, and I think that's true whether it's in the UK, whether it's across Africa, or of course whether it's in South Africa.
The South African Federation of Trade Unions has written to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies requesting an urgent meeting regarding a recently gazetted policy directive for the ICT sector. Now, this follows Minister Solly Maladzi's announcement of proposed changes to the BBBEE policies in the ICT sector. These changes could allow companies to invest in the country without adhering to the 30% ownership regulation. Maladzi has been summoned to appear before the Portfolio Committee today. SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi say they view Maladzi's move as government being played during last week's meeting at the White House.
We have just written a letter to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communication and Digital Technologies to ask for an urgent discussion so that we can raise with the committee our disgust and alarm that Honorable Solly Maladzi is now pursuing actions that could potentially undermine South Africa's established regulatory frameworks, including laws governing spectrum licensing, ownership requirements, and data sovereignty.
The Japanese government is to release an extra 300,000 tons of rice from its stockpiles to bring down sky-high prices. The issue has become a major concern for consumers. Crop damage from extreme heat and increasing demand from tourism have contributed to a surge in rice prices. The BBC's Mickey Bristow has the details.
The government has already released several batches from its stockpiles, but the price of rice, which has doubled in a year, has not come down. This time the rice will go straight to retailers to cut down on bureaucracy and get it onto shop shelves more quickly. Rising prices are undermining support for the Japanese government. Its reputation was further damaged last week when the agriculture minister was forced to resign for saying he was given so much rice that he didn't have to buy any.
And finally, the European Union has urged fast fashion retailer Shein to respect EU consumer protection laws and warned that it could face fines if it fails to address its concerns. Shein has grown rapidly by shipping inexpensive products directly to consumers. In February, the European Commission warned Shein and Temu, another Chinese online commerce platform, that they would be liable for the sale of unsafe and dangerous products sold on their sites. The Consumer Protection Cooperation Network of National Consumer Authorities and the European Commission has now notified Shein of practices which infringed EU consumer law. The company has 1 month to reply to the CPC network's findings and propose commitments on how they will address the identified consumer law issues. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1 Naira 589. In Botswana, it's 13 Bula 30. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 22, and in Zambia it's 27 kwacha 46. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 64. Russia is 79 rubles 41. India is 85 rupees 10. China it's 7 yuan 19, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 80. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,346 and platinum at $1,081 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $64.53 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
And it's time now for our G20 fact for the morning. Did you know that South Africa has proposed the establishment of a cost of capital commission during its G20 presidency? Well, this commission will deliver a comprehensive expert review on the issues impacting the cost of capital for developing economies, which could help address future debt sustainability issues and the related fiscal space challenges. And that is your G20 fact for today.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
6:45 Central African time it is. Good morning if you've just joined us. We go to Malawi now in this next story, where the increasing short supply of sugar on the market in that country has forced consumers to be subjected to what economists say are exploitative prices. The price of a 1 kilogram packet of sugar has at the moment surged to $3.5 US. That's double the recommended government price. Surveys show that sugar vendors are selling the commodity at exorbitant prices due to a serious shortage and an alleged hoarding by some distributors. George Mango reports from Blantyre.
With the short supply, consumers buy a packet of sugar at $3.05 from Mayor traders, as opposed to the recommended government set price of $1.77. In major chain stores, retail and wholesale shops, long queues are the order of the day, just in anticipation that the product would be available. Traders in locations are the ones who worsen the situation, leading to a rise in prices, making sugar less affordable for many Malawians. One of the consumers, Jonathan Jere, is bitter with the situation.
There are a lot of things which need sugar. So if there's no sugar, it means there's a bit of problem, especially to those babies, because they are used to eat something that is sugar. So if there is no sugar, you find that maybe they might not be eating what they have been eating. And the stress of moving around shops seeking for sugar is another disturbing thing. And something that sometimes makes you a bit to be angry because you can't find whatever you want. So the scarcity of sugar generally, it is a worrisome.
Ilovo Sugar Malawi, a subsidiary of Ilovo Sugar Group Limited, and Salima Sugar, which is owned by the Malawi government, are facing hard times to flood the market with the product. The companies were last month forced to hike the price due to what they said was the cost of inflation across the supply chain, rising costs of essential raw materials, electricity, water, and goods and services required for sugar production. But one of the producing companies, Salima Sugar, expects to produce 22,000 metric tons this year to help ease the shortage, according to its chief executive officer, Wester Kosam.
The scarcity of sugar on our part cannot be attributed to Salima Sugar. Salima Sugar is not a big company that can satisfy the whole market, but it's trying to supplement what has already been on the market. There's that kind of misconception where people say maybe there are companies who are holding sugar. We give the sugar to our distributors. But I should confess here that there are some distributors who are holding the sugar, and it's true.
The rising cost of living, including sugar, has fueled calls for government's intervention to address the issue. This is why the Competitions and Fair Trading Commission, CFTC, which is a government-owned institution, has launched investigations against traders into exploitative pricing. CFTC has since warned of stiff penalties. Innocent Helema is the spokesperson of CFTC.
Be informed that this week and of course next week, CFTC is collecting data on prices of basic household goods. This is actually aimed at establishing any excessive pricing conducts and take such traders to book. It is actually a violation of the Competition and Fair Trading Act to increase prices unreasonably, such as exploitative or excessive pricing.
Minister of Trade and Industry Vitumbiko Mumba recently conducted inspections in warehouses of some megastores where he found that some were hoarding the product. Economists say Malawi's sugar market is projected to experience mixed growth patterns in the coming years, with a peak of 18.94% in 2028 and a projected growth rate of 17.21% by 2027. George Muhango, Channel Africa News, Blantyre.
The Thabo Mbeki annual Africa Day lecture, which was held in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania on Saturday, heard that while some African nations have made strides and progress in strengthening their institutions and promoting good governance, others sadly continue to struggle. Now, these sentiments were echoed by Tanzania's Minister for Information, Culture, Arts and Sports, Professor Kabudi. He says that with corruption, weak accountability and limitations in the rule of law, Africa still suffers from regal pluralism and remains a hostage of the legal catches of the colonial era. Nhlanhla Mahlangu reports.
The University of South Africa, in partnership with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the government of Tanzania, and the Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation, hosted the 15th annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, under the theme, The State of the Continent. Professor Palagamba Kabudi says the state of governance and the rule of law in Africa today presents a complex and evolving landscape. He says the trajectory of the states of governance varies significantly across the continent, with ongoing challenges and some notable successes.
Let us make progress of adopting the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. And that was the issue of self-determination, but also the issue of Africa asserting itself. So we need to strengthen the African Court of Human and People's Rights based at Arusha, but at the same time in tackling issues of corruption and accountability, we need now to transform the African Union Advisory Board against corruption, which is also based in Arusha, not to be an advisory board, but actually to be an institution which will now tackle issues.
Tanzanian author and academic emeritus Professor Isa Shivji says new liberalism and the state adjustment programs over the last 3 decades have had devastating effects on societies.
It destroyed the social fabric of our societies. Our society has become extremely polarized, with a small group of people obscenely rich and a large majority of the people filthy poor. Go to any African countries. Once you step outside the main highways and streets, you will see the poverty. And in our villages, to this day, there was rise in absolute relative poverty. Figures are there. Unemployment rising by the day. Today we all talk about youth unemployment. It's a real issue in Africa. But few of us are prepared to admit that partly, if not wholly, is due to the kind of policies that imposed on us and which we embraced. These leaders who eat first, embraced them, because they could continue eating first. It was in their interest to embrace them.
In responding to the discussion, Sabato Nyamsenda, a PhD student in political science at the University of Dar es Salaam, says challenges that Africa faces are not a call to despair, but a call to action.
We are saying this state which oppresses its people, internally very strong, but externally very weak. We want to change things upside down, to subject it to popular power, okay, so that the people can decide how to govern themselves. So a lot of power should be in the hands of the people themselves, while the state should be strong externally when dealing with external powers. Now these are 2 very radical demands which we think cannot be implemented by the current setup of the African states. Because first, they are disunited, second, they are too weak, and third, they are presided by a class, a ruling class that is not committed to the radical transformation of African people. It's a class that accumulates for itself, which serves foreign interests rather than the interests of Africa.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu.
Brazilian ambassador to South Africa, Benedicto Fonseca Filho, has highlighted the deep historical and cultural ties between Brazil and Africa during Africa Day celebrations held at Freedom Park in Pretoria on Sunday. Speaking to Channel Africa, the ambassador asserted that nearly half of Brazil's population is of African descent, affirming that there is no Brazil without Africa. He praised South Africa's leadership as the current G20 chair, calling its role vital for advancing the interests of the Global South. Ambassador Fonseca also spoke on the importance of multilateral cooperation, particularly through platforms like BRICS and the G20, to address global challenges such as climate change and development. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe spoke to Brazilian ambassador to South Africa, Benedicto Fonseca Filho.
I consider it a privilege and a real honor to represent Brazil in South Africa, and to participate today in the celebration of Africa Day is really something special. As I have said, almost half of the Brazilian population is of African descent, so Africa is a very important part of our heritage. We have a slogan that from the embassy we cultivate, that is, there is no Brazil without Africa. We are the second largest, we have the second largest black population in the whole world. After Nigeria, we are the second largest. So the African presence is there in culture, in gastronomy, in the daily today, the language. So it is part of what we are. It's a great pleasure to be here to celebrate and to reaffirm our commitment to work together with Africa to enhance participation in world affairs, to work towards our development. We share similar challenges, we share similar circumstances. We are a multiracial nation with its potential, but also with its problems. So we fully share Africa's struggle, first towards liberation, which is completed, but now towards its development. We want to be part of that. We want to share in this collective endeavor. You can count on us. We will be always happy, and on a personal note, I will be extremely happy to contribute to that.
Also looking at the bilateral relations between Brazil and African countries being led by South Africa. South Africa just took the chairship of the G20 from Brazil to South Africa and currently hosting the G20 summit. Your message to South Africa and then also other nations that are supporting Africa in hosting this G20?
Yes, I should thank in the name of Brazil what South Africa is doing, because what South Africa is trying to achieve, and we know it's a big challenge. For us, last year it was an extremely challenging exercise chairing G20 because there are so many streams of work and all of them are very important for us. But I would like to say what South Africa is doing is not doing only in the name of South Africa or only in the name of Africa, but in the name of the global South, because all the topics, all the priorities, all the streams of work are of interest for all of us. And I would even say not only the global South, but for the world as a whole, because we believe in shared prosperity. We believe that we have to work together to overcome the greatest challenges we are facing, climate change, the development issues, the fight against hunger. So all of these are causes that, of course, as developing countries, we have to push. It's up to us to be champion of these causes, but they are causes that for the whole world. We don't believe in a prosperity that leaves others behind. So we really thank South Africa, and we'd be happy to work with South Africa to make G20 a big success and to put in place in a very clear way the priorities, to move forward in the priorities of developing countries.
All right, that takes us neatly to just before the top of the hour, 7 o'clock Central African time, which means that there's a lot that we're looking forward to in the next hour.
That previous story was Channel Africa's reporter Michael Bewe speaking to Brazilian ambassador to South Africa, Benedicto Fonseca Filho. Coming up in this hour, what can we expect? Talk about Starlink.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because South Africa apparently is relaxing the BEE regulations. That's affirmative action for people beyond the continent, where positive discrimination favoring locals, so that Elon Musk doesn't have to fulfill the stringent requirements in terms of bringing or investing in South Africa without giving away shareholding. So the government is denying this. We're not sure exactly what the story is, but it would be a game changer for people to have a satellite-based internet instead of fiber and these masts. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And it's the world's first, that Starlink one, so it would be great for us to have that history.
Yeah.
In the country. Well, we're going to get our news with Jalane Tumwepe. If you've just joined us for the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine, thank you so much for doing that. Remember, you can find us on our social media platforms. Our handles are at Channel Africa 1 across all those different platforms. After the news with Jalane Tulo Mwepe is Sports Headlines with Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The former African Union ambassador to the U.S., Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao, says the treatment given to South Africans at the White House serves as a reminder to African leaders that the game has changed and that they need to re-strategize when approaching the U.S. This follows last week's meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump, which aimed to strengthen bilateral ties. During the meeting, Trump presented a video of EFF leader Julius Malema singing the Kill the Boer chant hunt, among other items, to support his incorrect claims of a genocide taking place against white Afrikaners in South Africa. Dr. Chihombori Kwao has criticized the South African delegation for failing to clarify issues of misinformation.
The manner in which diplomacy used to be handled, that game is over. This is a new game and it needs new strategy. The manner in which they were treated is a reminder to the African leaders that before you go to meet with President Trump, you better make sure that you have a team that is prepared, a team that knows their game, from the political to the social to the economic to trade. I just feel that the team that was with President Ramaphosa was not prepared for what they received in Washington. They could have done better.
South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema has accused the Umkhonto weSizwe party leader Jacob Zuma of being pretentious about his call for black unity. This follows Zuma's long-standing call for unity amongst black and like-minded parties. In its formative stages, the MK party worked with the EFF and formed the Progressive Caucus in Parliament. But the relations of the two parties soured with the departure of EFF's former Deputy President, Floyd Shivambu, who is now the MKP's Secretary-General, together with Dalim Mpofu, Mzwanele Manyi and advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, among others. Malema brands the MKP as his enemy, saying he will never work with a party that seeks to destroy the EFF.
We will never unite with Zuma, who wants to kill the EFF. Whether Trump says the same thing about the two of us, we don't care. We must never be tempted to unite with the agents who want to destroy the EFF. If Zuma wants unity of black people, why did he form MK when there was EFF? There is no unity they are talking about. They are pretentious about it. Zuma is about himself and about his family. That's why he went to form that Spaza show.
The South African National Defence Force has dismissed a report by a newspaper article that its members withdrawing from the Democratic Republic of Congo are to surrender their weapons while transiting through Rwanda. It says this article must be condemned in the strongest possible terms as nothing but hearsay. Ditaba Tsodetsi has more.
In a statement, the SANDF says that this article is not factual and appears to be aimed at creating panic and discrediting all involved. It also says that this reporting compromises the safety of the troops. And the SANDF says that the author of this story did not verify the facts with the authorities. SANDF troops are withdrawing from the DRC after an agreement was reached by SADC and the East African Community to allow peace processes to resume.
A spokesperson for Germany's foreign ministry has called the accusations that Berlin's ambassador to Kampala is involved in disruptive activities in the East African country absurd and without merit. The accusations against Matthias Schauer came after he reportedly raised concerns about Army Chief General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is the president's son, at a meeting last week. On X recently, the general threatened to behead opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi, popularly known as Bobby Wine. Rights groups have long accused the Ugandan government of targeting the opposition, especially in the run-up to the elections in January next year. Uganda's military has now cut all military cooperation with Germany. And finally, British police say an incident in which a car ploughed into crowds at the Victory Parade for Liverpool Football Club is not connected to terrorism. At a press briefing, officials said 27 people, including children, had been taken to hospital, 2 of whom had suffered serious injuries. A 53-year-old British man has been arrested. Liam Robinson is from Liverpool City Council.
We're working very closely with Merseyside Police to support their investigation and with other relevant organisations to make sure those affected get the appropriate support. I would appeal for people, please do not share the horrifying footage of the incident on social media. Please, if you have any information, forward it to Merseyside Police to help them with their investigation.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. African perspective.
A sports headline: South Africa's national women's football team has reported for camp ahead of the Three Nations Challenge. And Namibia's Minister of Sport, Sanet Steenkamp, has called on Southern African governments to increase investment in athletes' development. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Peda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Right, let's start with this story. The severe impact of the funding cut by the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, across the African continent is still being felt months after the cut was announced. In South Africa, 12 clinics have been closed and over 8,000 people are now without jobs. One of the latest clinics to shut its doors is a major cervical cancer screening and prevention clinic in Johannesburg. It's been in existence for 20 years, mainly treating HIV-positive women. Sisi Sechalo picks up the story for us.
Cervical cancer is the second most common cancer among South African women after breast cancer, and remains the leading cause of cancer-related deaths. According to the World Health Organization, South Africa sees about 6,000 new cases of cervical cancer each year, and almost 3,000 women die annually from the disease. Timely screening and early detection is key to preventing cervical cancer. The closure of the clinical HIV research unit in Johannesburg has been described as a blow to the fight against the cruel disease. Dr. Mark Fasson, gynecologist and fertility specialist at the now closed clinic, gives the number of patients they used to see.
So we see about 1,000, as I said, 1,000 patients per year coming through for a pap smear. Plus, we see about 430, 440 patients every year for this specific specialized treatment that they need to prevent cancer. And all these patients, close to 1,500 patients every year, will now have to be directed to the public hospital.
He says the closure will impact cervical cancer prevention efforts in South Africa, which faces one of the highest rates of cervical cancer in the world. He says their former patients will now have to queue at public health facilities and wait close to a year to be assisted. The closure will also further burden the public health care system. Fasten again.
So the specialized service is colposcopy and treatment for high-grade lesions to prevent cancer. It's done just by a few hospitals, Rahima Musa, Baragwanath. And because now this large number of patients will have to go through the public channels, the waiting times there will be extended. At the moment, the waiting time is about 2-3 months, and that will then probably increase again to what it was before we started our service, which is 10-11 months.
In a recent press briefing by South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, to address the impact of the US funding cuts, Motsoaledi tried to downplay the effects of the funding cut. However, he did admit that there were problems.
PEPFAR was supporting the Department of Health in 27 HIV/AIDS high-burden districts out of 52 districts in the country, in 8 provinces. In these 27 districts, there were only 12 specialized clinics that were independent from government and managed by NGOs, providing services mainly for key populations, and they were funded by PEPFAR. Key populations include transgender men having sex with men, sex workers, and people who inject drugs.
It remains to be seen if the Clinical HIV Research Unit clinic in Johannesburg will get the funding to reopen its doors to the thousands who desperately need the facility. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sechalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South Africa's Communications and Digital Technologies Minister, Solly Malatsi, will appear before Parliament today to, among others, explain the newly gazetted ICT Policy Directive. Malatsi gazetted an amendment to the State Information Technology Agency Act that may clear the way for tech billionaire Elon Musk's Starlink to operate in the country. Starlink is the world's first and largest network of satellites using a low Earth orbit to deliver broadband internet access to over 60 countries. Zara Groenewald filed this report.
Controversy is brewing over the potential easing of regulations by Communications Minister Solly Malatsi over US company Starlink. Starlink is a network of satellites operated by Elon Musk's SpaceX, providing satellite internet access coverage to a number of countries, including neighboring Botswana, Lesotho, and Mozambique. Leading tech evangelist Aki Anastasio explains.
Starlink is another alternative way of providing internet connectivity in very remote areas. So what Starlink does is they've got these satellites, they're called low-orbit satellites, that sit about 600 kilometers above the Earth's surface, and they just transmit down to Earth. They transmit data. If you've got a receiver and you want to connect to the internet, it allows you to connect. They've got about 8,000 of these satellites that really blanket the Earth and just allows you to connect to the internet in remote areas, providing low latency, high-speed connectivity.
On Friday, Malatsi gazetted a policy in which broad-based black economic empowerment policies will be eased to accommodate such companies. A member of the official opposition who serves in Parliament's Communications Portfolio Committee says these regulations will never be approved without the buy-in of legislators. MK Party MP Colleen Makubele says these draft regulations are anti-transformative and has demanded Malatsi account before parliamentarians on Tuesday.
It cannot be done without the approval of Parliament, let me put it that way, because the legislature, the acts, this is a function of Parliament, and we have an oversight role as legislators and in our committees to oversee it. And if you want to do anything, introduce regulations, you must first change the act. So you can't introduce a junior regulation to ease without changing the act. It cannot be in conflict with the act. And even in introducing regulations, there are processes that you follow that have been flawed already.
Other parties have raised their objections to the draft regulations, citing that the rules cannot be bent to favour Musk. These include ANC's first Deputy Secretary General Nomvulo Mokoyane and EFF leader Julius Malema.
South Africa cannot create laws specifically for Elon Musk. We know that even with the World Cup, the amendment of the legal framework had to do with what is good for South Africa. And even in this instance, we know that the issues about what the minister has raised must actually find expression in the parliamentary processes.
The following day, they issue out that they want to relax the PEE deals so that this Starlink can come into South Africa. There is no such a law in South Africa. That Starlink will not come into South Africa if it's not compliant with the PEE. We are not saying 30% must go to one individual. That 30% must go to black people.
Meanwhile, the DA has welcomed the proposed amendments. This is DA MP Tsolofelo Budlani.
The DA welcomes the move by Minister Malatsi on the proposed amendments to the country's ICT legislation. The historic lack of political will and failure to amend legislation has delayed our development. This has hindered access to the economy for many South Africans. We call on all South Africans to use this opportunity to make their views known and to help ensure that their voices are heard during this historic period.
The public has 30 days to comment on the draft regulations. I am Zara Groenewald in Johannesburg.
So at 7:15 Central African time, let's now unpack this, continuing with that story on Starlink, and we're joined on the line by Arthur Goldstuck, who is analyst and technology commentator and founder of technology market research organization Worldwide Works. He's also editor-in-chief of Gadget.co.za. Arthur, thank you so much for joining us. How are you on this Tuesday?
Thank you. Good morning. Very well, and you?
I'm good, thanks so much. So this move by Minister Solly Malatsi to gazette an amendment to the State Information Technology Agency Act, it's seen as something that will clear the way for Elon Musk's Starlink to operate in the country. In what ways exactly will it do this?
It certainly clears the way for Starlink to operate in South Africa, but it also clears the way for any other operator to operate that kind of service in South Africa. And the way it works is that they have a satellite constellation that is capable of providing high-speed broadband connectivity anywhere in the country. Now, bear in mind, there's vast areas of South Africa that are not connected. They're either inhospitable because of mountains, or they're isolated because they're in semi-desert areas and the like, where it's simply not economically feasible to lay down fiber or even to put down cell phone towers. And satellite connectivity fills those gaps. But at the moment, satellite connectivity is very expensive and it's very slow, because the satellites that provide that kind of connectivity are in fairly high orbit. So the signal that comes down is a very slow signal. The lag is very high, but it's also exceptionally expensive. A system called VSAT has been in use for a long time in this country, but it's only used by big organizations, large-scale farmers, and some government entities. Something like Starlink, and they're not the only ones, but something like Starlink will provide a far more accessible service at a far higher speed, because they use what are called low Earth orbit, LEO satellites, and those give you high-speed access. The cost is a lot lower. It's still not accessible to someone who doesn't earn a reasonable income, because it'll cost more than 1,000 Rand a month to access. But if you think about someone being able to get the equipment, which will cost about 10,000 Rand, put the equipment anywhere in a mountain, in a valley, in the middle of the desert, and they can then provide a mobile hotspot for other people in the area. So what's initially a high cost for an individual would be quite accessible by a small business or someone who wants to resell services. So it's a great entrepreneurial opportunity, but it also brings access where no access is currently possible. And it's a great example of how the current rules have actually held back development in South Africa, because they haven't helped anybody get access in those circumstances, whereas changing the rule to equity equivalence then makes it possible to bring access, and it boosts investment in the country. So it baffles me that people would actually object to something like this, because it may just benefit one person or organization. The reality is it benefits the country as a whole.
What are the legal issues around these proposed amendments by the minister?
Well, as people have indicated, there's a law in place that dictates a 30% black ownership of telecoms organizations, and that law has to be amended. And that's currently what the minister is working on. But if you look at the laws affecting the ICT sector, information and communications technology at large, you have that equity equivalence in place. It's been in place for a long time. And the result of that has been that large multinationals like Microsoft and Amazon have invested heavily in this country, not just in infrastructure, but also in skills development. We've had an organization like Cisco, for example, training thousands of people in networking engineering, and many other examples of the same kind because of these equity equivalence rules. So it's really boosted skills in this country in a very big way. And what this amendment will do is bring telecoms in line with the rest of the ICT sector. So the reality is that telecoms currently is out of line with the general rule for ICT organizations. It's not the other way around. And that's what the critics seem to misunderstand.
Starlink is already in operation in 18 countries on the continent of Africa. What are the chances, in your view, of the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa approving this, or ICASA approving this?
Well, if the policy is changed, if the law is changed, then it's ICASA's role to facilitate the rollout of licensing in this regard. The big issue is going to be for those organizations where they already had the 30% investment and where suddenly they feel that they are having to play by different rules to the newcomers. So that could be an issue. But the truth is, if the policy directive goes through, then it's ICASA's role to implement it.
Some, as you say, have criticized this move. How do you see that the different groupings of those who say this is a pro-Starlink or pro-Elon Musk move, and others are saying no, but this is a pro-black economic empowerment within the ICT sector move? Which one do you think it is? I know that's a bit of a political question.
It's in between. It's a pro-investment move, and it's also pro-development. And that's really what has to be the ultimate deciding factor, not who gets to benefit. And unfortunately, that mindset has held back development in this country because some interest parties, let's say, benefit. The politicians on one side or the other of the table object, not because of what it'll do for the country, not because of the actual terms, but because of someone might benefit that they object to. And I think that's what they call a dog in the manger approach. If I can't have it, nobody else can have it. And that holds back the country.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks again for your time, Arthur. Always great chatting to you on Channel Africa.
Thank you, Asanda.
Thanks. Arthur Goldstuck talking to us there about this move to have amendments made to our State Information Technology Agency Act and how that can impact Starlink being able to operate in South Africa. Arthur Goldstuck is analyst and technology commentator, founder of technology market research organization Worldwide Works, and also editor-in-chief of Gadget.co.za.
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et votre 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Time now for us to go to the Democratic Republic of Congo and particularly the east of the region. A dramatic political twist is unfolding in the DRC. Former President Joseph Kabila has returned to Goma, the capital of the North Kivu province, after years of self-imposed silence and retreat from frontline politics. Well, his arrival follows a controversial move by the Congolese Senate to lift his immunity, paving the way for possible prosecution on charges of treason. Now, this comes amid accusations by the Kinshasa government that Kabila has ties to the M23 rebel movement, which continues to destabilize the eastern part of the country. Well, former President Kabila himself says that he merely is just interested in trying to bring peace to the country. He had spent a lot of time here in South Africa, but his arrival back in the DRC, I think, has provoked Kinshasa, the current president, and so it looks as if that all the forces are now being brought to bear to try and prosecute President Kabila. Well, we're hoping to get on the line our correspondent Jimmy Shukrani Bakonera, who's in Goma in the DRC, to give us a sense of what's happening on the ground, whether Mr. Kabila has been welcomed with open arms in that part of the country, and if there's actually any evidence that he is directly linked to the M23 rebel movement in that part of the country. Let's see if we've got Jimmy on the line now. All right, we're struggling to get Jimmy on the line there, but I guess the questions really that are being asked now is this all political? And I think former President Thabo Mbeki had cautioned against this kind of thing where immunity is lifted because there is a greater picture in terms of peace that's required. Well, let's go to Jimmy Shukran Bakanero now and get a sense of what's happening with Kabila's return there. Jimmy, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. Hello, Jimmy, can you hear me? All right, it looks like we're struggling to get Jimmy Shukrani Bakanero on the line there. And as I was saying, that the Kinshasa government has said that former President Kabila is linked to the M23 rebel movement in the country. And one wonders, though, because it doesn't seem as if any evidence has been presented that can be verified. But this is what they're saying. Kabila himself has said that all he's interested in is bringing peace to the east of the country. He doesn't have much confidence in what's been happening, the way the government has been handling the insecurity in the east of the country. His own political party has also been suspended in the country, and this does sadly doesn't point a great picture towards the democratic story in the DRC. So we're not sure what former President Kabila is wanting to do in the DRC, in the eastern part of the country. As I said, he's been spending much of his time here in South Africa in exile, and now finds himself in the DRC, in Goma in particular, where it is a particular hotspot in terms of the insecurity in the region. And could this signal a deeper power struggle within the Congolese political elite? Only time will tell, and one wonders if it's a battle between Kabila loyalists and President Felix Tshisekedi's government. Most political commentators probably pointing towards that direction. All right, we're going to try and get to that story perhaps a little bit later on in the program, because we're not going to. Doesn't look like we're going to be able to reach him at the minute.
Coming up also on the show, we'll be looking at Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, who is on a 2-day state visit to Guinea-Bissau. A visit that's coming just months after Guinea-Bissau brokered a peace deal with the Movement of Democratic Forces in Casamance, or MDFC, and the Senegalese government. We also look at water and the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Tunnel, a crucial lifeline between Lesotho and South Africa. We spoke about this yesterday with the Deputy Minister, and that now being in operation again. So that's something you can stay tuned for at Channel Africa's Africa Rise and Shine.
So you know me, and today in history, and I'm always circumspect of things like this. But you know, the history books written by the West. Yeah. Today in 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary of New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay of Nepal became the first climbers confirmed to have reached the summit of Mount Everest, the world's highest peak. And now this achievement was announced publicly on June the 2nd, coinciding with Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. But there were locals that lived there, Sherpas now that we know, who help people climb Mount Everest. Surely there must have been for centuries before Edmund Hillary and Torgay. It was almost like David Livingstone discovering Victoria Falls. Come on. The locals have been fishing there for years and years.
There's a woman that they did I'm trying to figure her name out. They did a documentary on Lakpa Sherpa, actually.
Yeah.
The woman who had climbed Mount Everest 10 times.
Oh, there you go. There you go. There you
And
go.
I was glad that she's actually Nepalese herself, so that's nice.
All right. Well, let's catch you up with the news headlines. Here's Jolane Tulongwete.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, the former African Union ambassador to the U.S., Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao, says the treatment given to South Africans at the White House serves as a reminder to African leaders that the game has changed and that they need to re-strategize when approaching the U.S. This follows last week's meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump, which aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. Ghana's foreign minister has temporarily closed the country's embassy in the U.S. It comes after an investigation uncovered an alleged scam targeting visa and passport applicants. And finally, a naval court in Greece has charged 17 coast guards over the deadliest migrant boat disaster in the Mediterranean Sea for a decade. Up to 650 people were feared to have drowned when the overcrowded Adriana fishing vessel sank in June 2023. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's say good morning to Fikile Lengwati for our sports update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. We begin with football news. South African women's football team, Banyana Banyana, is grateful for the opportunities to play warm-up matches ahead of the defense of its Women's Africa Cup of Nations title in Morocco in July. Previously, there was an outcry from the team over a lack of opportunities ahead of major events. Banyana are in camp in Pretoria preparing for the friendly international matches against Botswana and Zambia over the next week or so. South Africa will be aiming to successfully defend their title they won in 2022. And Captain Refilwe Jane, who just returned from a long injury layoff, says the team is grateful for the warm-up matches.
Over the years, there was a challenge of fully preparing for big tournaments, but this time around things have changed. Thanks to Sasol, thanks to SAFA for helping and making sure that each and every FIFA window we get to play friendly games, we get to play tournaments and things of such. So that gives us the team a bit of time to gel in together, gives coaches time to see other players. So with all these games that we keep on getting, we try to build on them so that by the time the tournament comes, we are fully ready.
The 22-player squad is a blend of experience and youth, while players make a welcome return from an assortment of injuries. Coach Desiree Ellis says the warm-up matches will give them an opportunity to test players ahead of the grueling WAFCON tournament in Morocco.
We're more here in testing players and giving players an opportunity, and sometimes when you're doing that you don't get the result that you want, but it's also about performance, because the performance will bring you the result, because it's all about being ready for WAFCON. That's the really important thing here. If we're ready now, then we have a problem, but it's going to test us, especially with some of the players coming back from injury, also to see where they're at, that have some really good minutes at the clubs, and to see what value they can still add, and with the newer ones coming in, can they raise their hands.
And Southern African governments to increase investment in athlete development. This comes from Steenkamp, that is the Minister of Sports in Namibia, and speaking at the 7th Regional Annual Sports Awards in Harare, in Zimbabwe this past weekend. Speaking in her capacity as the chairperson of the African Union Sports Council Region 5 Council of Ministers, Steenkamp praised Zimbabwe for its outstanding hospitality and for hosting a truly memorable and exceptional event. Steenkamp urged Region 5 member states to adopt more sustainable fireworks for sport development. She also paid tribute to Zimbabwe's Kirsty Coventry, who was recently elected as the first African and first woman president of the International Olympic Committee. Steenkamp called on attendees to meet at the upcoming Region 5 Youth Games to be hosted in Namibia in July. Let's end with tennis news. World number one Jannik Sinner defied a late wobble to begin his French Open campaign with a straight-set victory over Arthur Ridden-Kenich. Playing his first Grand Slam match since serving a 3-month doping ban, Italian Sinner beat his French opponent 6-4, 6375 on Court Philippe Chatrier. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons danser au son de Haya, que je dédicace à vous tous, chers auditeurs, qui êtes en train de suivre cette émission Mix Vibration. N'oubliez pas, vous pouvez nous suivre à partir de l'application SABC+. Vous choisissez Channel Africa pour suivre l'émission en direct. Nous allons danser au son de Haya.
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Right, it's time now to take a look at what's happening in the world of business, economics, and commerce. A very good morning to you, Nosipo Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news, Tasawa, South Africa's Deputy Public Works Minister, Sihle Zikalala, says it is satisfying that the Treasury is fast tracking the issue of regulations. He says this will guide how to implement and ensure that the private sector plays a role in funding infrastructure. Zikalala was speaking at the 2025 Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium in Cape Town in the Western Cape Province.
We are happy that the Treasury is fast-tracking the issue of regulations that will guide on how to implement and ensure that the private sector plays a role in funding infrastructure, even the public infrastructure. The ownership will remain with the state. We will want to see private sector investing for a particular time, then hand over to the state. That's how some of the triple Ps work, like build, operate, and transfer. Once there is unsolicited bid, it is always proper to test the market.
Meanwhile, the UK's Trade Commissioner for Africa, John Humphrey, says the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium offers London the opportunity to connect, network and share experience. Humphrey is part of the delegates attending the 3-day gathering in Cape Town. The meeting seeks to attract a private partnership with the government. Humphrey articulates UK's position.
And clearly, obviously, at the end of the day, that UK companies can contribute to, or UK investors can contribute to, and which deliver things for people. So I think in Africa as a whole, I mean, there's a lot of evidence to show that infrastructure is what's required to drive economic growth and prosperity. You know, whether that's a school child who can't get to their school because there's no bridge over the river, or somebody can't get their products to market, or somebody who's living out in the country can't get into a city for their job. So infrastructure delivers growth, and I think that's true whether it's in the UK, whether it's across Africa, or of course whether it's in South Africa.
The South African Federation of Trade Unions has written to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies requesting an urgent meeting regarding a recently gazetted policy directive for the ICT sector. Now, this follows Minister Solly Malatsi's announcement of proposed changes to the BBBEE policies and the ICT sector. These changes could allow companies to invest in the country without adhering to the 30% ownership regulations. Malatsi has been summoned to appear before the Portfolio Committee today. SAFTU General Secretary Zwelithini Mavavi says they view Malatsi's move as government being played during last week's meeting at the White House.
We have just written a letter to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communication and Digital Technologies to ask for an urgent discussion so that we can raise with the committee our disgust and alarm that Honorable Solly Malatsi is now pursuing actions that could potentially undermine South Africa's established regulatory frameworks, including laws governing spectrum licensing, ownership requirements, and data sovereignty.
The Japanese government is to release an extra 300,000 tons of rice from its stockpiles to bring down sky-high prices. The issue has become a major concern for consumers. Crop damage from extreme heat and increasing demand from tourism have contributed to a surge in rice prices. The BBC's Mekki Bristow has the details.
The government has already released several batches from its stockpiles, but the price of rice, which has doubled in a year, has not come down. This time the rice will go straight to retailers to cut down on bureaucracy and get it onto shop shelves more quickly. Rising prices are undermining support for the Japanese government. Its reputation was further damaged last week when the agriculture minister was forced to resign for saying he was given so much rice that he didn't have to buy any.
And finally, the European Union has urged fast fashion retailer Shein to respect EU consumer protection laws and warned that it could face fines if it fails to address its concerns. Shein has grown rapidly by shipping inexpensive products directly to consumers. In February, the European Commission warned Shein and Temu, another Chinese online e-commerce platform, that they would be liable for the sale of unsafe and dangerous products sold on their sites. The Consumer Protection Corporation CPC network of national consumer authorities and the European Commission has now notified Shein of practices which infringed EU consumer laws. The company has 1 month to reply to the CPC network's findings and propose commitments on how they will address the identified consumer law issues. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1 Naira 589, and Botswana it's 13 Pula 30. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 22, and in Zambia it's 27 kwacha 46. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 64. Russia is 79 rubles 41. India is 85 rupees 10. China at 7 yuan 19, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 80. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,346 and platinum at $1,081 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $64.53 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Posoma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Water is once again flowing through the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Tunnel, a crucial cross-border lifeline between Lesotho and South Africa. Following a 6-month maintenance shutdown, the tunnel has officially reopened, restoring a vital water supply to millions. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange brings us the full story from Clarence in the Free State Province.
The reopening of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Tunnel marks a major milestone for South Africa and Lesotho, ensuring continued water security for millions. The tunnel, which was shut down on the 1st of October 2024, was due for routine maintenance scheduled every 5 years. South Africa completed its share of the work on time, but delays on the Lesotho side extended the shutdown. Minister of Water and Sanitation in South Africa, Phemi Majodina, explains.
By March, our team, South African team, was done with the major maintenance. As you know, that this is the project between two countries, Lesotho and South Africa. We were done on time, right on time. By the 31st of March, we were done and dusted on the South African side. However, on the Lesotho side, they were not done. Their delays were caused by inclement weather. They couldn't work on the site. They requested additional 3 weeks to mid-April.
The Lesotho Highlands Water Project is one of the most important binational infrastructure initiatives on the continent, supporting water delivery and economic development in both countries. Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation David Mahlobo says proper maintenance will extend the life of the tunnel and help secure future supply.
One of the most important aspects is that this tunnel, as it exists between the two countries, it's an important milestone because if the tunnel is maintained, in other words, the useful life of this particular assets get enhanced. Now that this tunnel, it normally gets to be, there's a scheduled maintenance over a period of 5 years. And every 5 years when you do it, you can increase the lifespan by more than 20 to 25 years. That's what we'll do. And when this tunnel now is available for the next 25 years, it then guarantees the assurance of availability of water.
But the tunnel does more than just transport water. It powers livelihoods, support agriculture, and even electricity generation. Deputy Minister Mahlobo adds,
this tunnel is so important for both two countries. On the Lesotho side, you know that they were blessed with water, especially the winter rainfall that they have. They get royalties so that they can stimulate their economies. The communities that side, they are getting jobs in terms of what we are doing, but more importantly, they are also being in a position to produce electricity. On our side, this particular tunnel fits into an important system. It's called the Integrated Vaal River System. The Integrated Vaal River System is supplied the Vaal Dam, supported by 14 other dams. It supplies more than 12 to 14 million South Africans.
Maintenance of the tunnel involved intensive work on both the infrastructure and coordination between the countries. Teboho Nkahle, South Africa's representative overseeing the project, gives insight into what the technical work involved.
The total length of the steel, that side, that was repainted, was about 2 kilometers, 2.168 kilometers. And the total surface was about 19,000 square meters. And we had to use about 43,000 liters of paint, 2,200 tons of sand to sandblast the old paint. It's been a very challenging journey. We missed our deadline, our self-imposed deadline of the 30th of March, but we are here. We've opened the water is running, so we have delivered, finally.
Despite the setbacks, water once again flows through the Clarence Tunnel, a lifeline for communities and industries alike. And with the project now complete, both South Africa and Lesotho look to the future, fortified by this joint achievement. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Clarence, Free State Province of South Africa.
A dramatic political twist is unfolding in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Former President Joseph Kabila has returned to Goma, the capital of North Kivu province. This after years of self-imposed exile and retreat from frontline politics. His arrival follows a controversial move by the Congolese Senate to lift his immunity, and this possibly paves the way for prosecution on charges of treason, and that's what's being reported. This comes amid accusations by Kinshasa's government that Kabila has ties to the M23 rebel movement, which continues to destabilize the eastern part of the country. To help us understand the implications of these developments and what they might mean, we're now joined by our correspondent in Goma, Jimmy Shukrani Bakonera. Jimmy, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's start with the mood on the ground in Goma. Has former President Kabila been welcomed by the locals?
Well, thank you, Peter. Just as you say, the former president is in Goma, and as you can remember, in the latest time, he was just supposed to arrive, but according to his communication team, they say that Kabila didn't come in Goma. But for now, the information was confirmed by the IFM 23 leaders that confirms that Kabila is in Goma, even if there is no picture which have been taken when he was on the ground to show the reality if really Kabila is in Goma. But the coordinator of the IFM23 confirms that the former president is here in Goma. So he didn't approached by maybe some leaders because he came in the night of Sunday, according to the M23, and they are supposing that maybe he will talk to people here in Goma in the coming days, even if the other social coaches could maybe invited by him just in order to understand him and to understand what's the problem which people are facing here in Goma and in the part of North Kivu. According to people here in Goma on the ground, they are happy. Some of them, they are happy to understand that the former president is in Goma because, you know, Kabila led this country about 8 years. So they are waiting maybe the resolution of a conflict here in the eastern part of DRC, the part which is torn by insecurity and others. As the one who have experienced, people are expecting that he will maybe give some solution because he knows very well this country. And when he was the president, he always liked to travel to Goma and other parts of eastern DRC. Maybe our listeners can know that Kabila has much things to do here in Goma because he has great farms in the Masisi territory. Is an area which is good in agriculture. Kabila has many farms there, and his arrival here in Goma, people are expecting that is maybe the end of the problems and the end of issues due to social, economic, which are facing, especially in Goma and Bukavu.
Has he said anything publicly about his party's suspension and also the lifting of the immunity that he's enjoyed as a former president?
Not yet, because since he was talking to population of DRC due to the speech which he held last Friday, there is no other thing which I've said publicly, because right now we are talking, and I didn't see him, but they are confirmed that he is here. And I didn't see him because he didn't talk to press, to local press here. And so we don't know what his reaction about his lifting of his immunity. But we have to wait only maybe in the coming days, as announced at the authorities of M23 that he will talk to public in the coming days. We are waiting. Just that will be one of the questions which maybe as journalists will ask him, I think.
Do we know if he's trying to make a political comeback? Has there been any indication that he wants to put himself on the front line? We know that he's been talking about being concerned about peace, but becoming a politician full on?
Yes, as you remember in his speech, Kabila just announced that he is able to put end to the dictator. The one which he called a dictator regime is the government of Kinshasa. Even if there is just opposite side, according to that word, that he was going to put end to the dictator, because he gave 12 points. One of them is to put end to the dictator and to put end to insecurity and to restoring state authority in the whole country, which have been abandoned by the government. So according to that which I have said, it shows very well that it's a political comeback, because even on his social media, he announced that really he is very able and available to save the country in the issues, especially in the insecurity issues which the country is in after his leaving the presidency. But this really, it shows that it's a comeback in politics, because to arrive in his country via the city of Goma, a city which is controlled by the M23, something like it was just a great challenge. In the people say that maybe if he could pass, he could use Kinshasa or Lubumbashi, where the government is controlled, he could be seized by the justice. But right now, he chose better to arrive via the Goma city in the eastern part of DRC, which he said it's abandoned by the authorities of Kinshasa. It means that it's a comeback in politics, and people are expecting maybe this comeback could be a source of solutions to some problems which they are traversing since 6 years since Joseph Kabila, the former president, have lived at the presidency.
So, who's in charge of Goma at this time? The city that former President Kabila finds himself in.
Really, since his arriving, you can imagine that. Maybe I will show you the pictures. The city is very, very calm. As you can, differently by the passing days before his arriving. Right now, the city is very calm, and we are expecting maybe that he is just giving some order, maybe to secure the city, and even the people who have just claimed he's arriving, maybe they gonna just respire this peace. So right now the city is calm, and the problem is that it didn't been showed in the public, but the city is very calm.
Is the city still under the control of the M23?
Sorry?
Is the city still under the control of the M23?
Well, of course, Goma is the capital of the North Kivu. It's still controlled by the M23, of course.
And I suppose this feeds into the idea that if he can travel easily into Goma, that maybe there is a connection with the M23 rebels that President Kabila has. Has any evidence come forward to support that?
Yes, I tried to ask that question to the representative of his party, the PPRD, but they said that Kabila is coming just to resolve the problems, not to confirm that he's just there is a relation between him and the M23. But some political analysts, they said he is confirming that his position, as said in Kinshasa accuses him that he's a collaborator of some armed group, including M23. But his interest, his party, he don't confirm that. Even him, he didn't confirm him. But in his speech, Peter, if you can remember, in his speech, he said that the M23 is an armed group which defending people who speak Kinyarwanda, and this can be maybe the one of the word which can confirm his relation, but we are only expecting. We don't know if he have a great relation, but he said that M23 is a Congolese group who defending a given people.
Jimmy, we're going to have to leave it there. As always, thanks so much indeed for your updates.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. That's Jimmy Shukrani Bakonera, who's our correspondent in the east of the DRC, where there are mixed reports about whether former President Kabila is actually there or not, but it does seem that he's definitely on the ground, but he's not making too many public appearances at this stage, and speculation continues. Is he involved with the M23? Is he making a political comeback? what is the significance of him traveling to DRC and the east of the country at this time, especially with the government lifting his immunity and possibly facing criminal charges? It's 8 o'clock Central African time. I'm Peter Ndoro. You are listening to Channel Africa, where we are broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Good morning, I'm Asanda Peta. If you've just joined us, well, thank you for doing that. We are with you for another hour of informing you in terms of what's happening on the continent and around it. 8 o'clock though now, it means that it's time for our news update. Here's Jwalani Tulo Mwepe, and then Fikile Lingwati will give you sports headlines after that.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The former African Union ambassador to the US, Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao, says the treatment given to South Africans at the White House serves as a reminder to African leaders that the game has changed and that they need to re-strategize when approaching the US. This follows last week's meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump, which aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. During the meeting, Trump presenting a video of EFF leader Julius Malema singing the Kill the Boer chant, among other items, to support his incorrect claims of a genocide taking place against white Afrikaners in South Africa. Dr. Chihombori Kwao has criticized the South African delegation for failing to clarify issues of misinformation.
The manner in which diplomacy used to be handled, that game is over. This is a new game and it needs new strategy. The manner in which they were treated is a reminder to the African leaders that before you go to meet with President Trump, you better make sure that you have a team that is prepared, a team that knows their game, from the political to the social to the economic to trade. I just feel that the team that was with President Ramaphosa was not prepared for what they received in Washington. They could have done better.
Ghana's foreign minister has temporarily closed the country's embassy in the US. It comes after an investigation uncovered an alleged scam targeting visa and passport applicants. The BBC's Andrew Ochieng has the details.
In a statement on social media, the foreign minister said Fred Kwateng, a member of staff hired locally in Washington, D.C. to the embassy's IT department, had allegedly created a link on the embassy's website which diverted applicants to his own company. For at least 5 years, he and other suspects allegedly received extra charges which they kept in a private account. Mr. Kwateng has been dismissed and all the Ghanaian staff at the embassy have been recalled home. The government says it's yet to determine how much the fraudsters made. It says the embassy will reopen in a few days after a restructuring and overhaul of the system.
South Africa's economic freedom fighters leader Julius Malema has accused the Umkhonto weSizwe party leader Jacob Zuma of being pretentious about his call for black unity. This follows Zuma's long-standing call for unity amongst black and like-minded parties. In its formative stages, the MK party worked with the EFF and formed the Progressive Caucus in Parliament, but the relations of the two parties soured with the departure of EFF's former Deputy President Floyd Shibambu, who is now MKP Secretary General, together with Dalimpofu Mzwanele Manyi and advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, among others. Malema brands the MKP as his enemy, saying he will never work with a party that seeks to destroy the EFF.
We will never unite with Zuma, who wants to kill the EFF. Whether Trump says the same thing about the two of us, we don't care. We must never be tempted to unite with the agents who want to destroy the EFF. If Zuma batla unity of black people, why did he form MK when there was EFF? There is no unity they are talking about. They are pretentious about it. Zuma is about himself and about his family. That's why he went to form that Spaza show.
A spokesperson for Germany's foreign ministry has called the accusations that Berlin's ambassador to Kampala is involved in disruptive activities in the East African countries absurd and without any merit. The accusations that Matthias Schauer came after he reportedly raised concerns about Army Chief General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is the president's son, at a meeting last week. On X recently, the general threatened to be behead opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi, popularly known as Bobby Wine. Rights groups have long accused the Ugandan government of targeting the opposition, especially in the run-up to the elections in January next year. Uganda's military has now cut all military cooperation with Germany. And finally, a naval court in Greece has charged 17 Coast Guards over the deadliest migrant boat disaster in the Mediterranean Sea for a decade. Up to 650 people were feared to have drowned when the overcrowded Adriana fishing vessel sank in January 2023. Nick Beek has the details.
The Greek authorities have always maintained they monitored the migrant boat but did not attempt to tow it because it was progressing steadily towards Italy. But 6 survivors told us the Coast Guard intervention sank their boat. Now the captain of the Coast Guard vessel that was in the area has been charged with causing a shipwreck, with his crew accused of being complicit. The then chief of the Greek Coast Guard, as well as the supervisor in the control room on land, have been charged with exposing others to danger.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo-Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Our sports headlines. The Kenya Sports Cabinet Secretary has dismissed concerns that they are not ready to host the African Nations Championship. And South Africa's national women's football team has reported for camp ahead of the Three Nations Challenge. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Peda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Now, Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye is currently on a 2-day state visit to neighboring Guinea-Bissau. And that's a diplomatic move that comes just months after Bissau helped mediate a peace deal between the Senegalese government and the separatist movement of the Democratic Forces of Casamance. Now, this visit signals a renewed commitment to regional cooperation, economic partnership and stability. To unpack the significance of this visit, both politically and perhaps economically, we're now joined by former senior economist at the United Nations, Ben Ouandji, who joins us now from Cameroon. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the program. Perhaps we can start by your thoughts in terms of how significant this visit is by President Faye.
It carries a very emotional dimension because since Guinea-Bissau gained its independence 50 years ago, no head of state of Senegal ever visited Bissau. So in terms of emotion, it's a very, very great moment. But the people of both countries did not wait for the head of state to move back and forth. The people of both countries, they travel to visit families and friends very frequently. From what I noticed when I was there in Guinea-Bissau for 2 months, many of the elites in Bissau, they travel very frequently to Dakar, using Dakar as an international hub, as a hub for international travel. They go to Dakar for shopping. They go to Dakar for schooling, to school the children, and for medical care. So the people have a tradition of crossing the borders back and forth. So if the head of state, Bassirou, comes today to Bissau, it will only on the institutional dimension reinforce the bilateral ties between the two countries.
What's changed then, do you think, between the two countries that this visit has come after such a long break?
Well, you know that Guinea-Bissau, since it gained its independence in 1974, in a dramatic in the dramatic ways. And the authorities in Dakar, in Senegal, at that time did not necessarily approve the way by which Guinea-Bissau became independent. So there was a soft Cold War between the two countries for many years. In addition to that, the authorities in Dakar were suspected that Bissau was hosting the armed rebellion in the Casamance. So it was difficult to really foster relations between the two countries. However, by 1986, 1987, it seems that the relations between the two countries were due to improve when Guinea-Bissau eventually joined the France CFA zone. So that was a catalytic factor for improving officially the commercial and financial relations between the two countries within the broad frame of ECOWAS regional integration framework. So another factor was that there was a civil war. There was repeated instability, military instability in Guinea-Bissau. That prompted the ECOWAS to send armed military troops to restore stability in Bissau. So all this background explained why it was difficult to have a presidential visit from of a Senegalese president to Bissau.
So what's likely to be the main points on the agenda for this particular visit, do you think?
Of course, there are obviously some points, some talking points that are already known, which is regional integration, free movement of populations, and maybe officially they will put on the talking points the issue of a peace accord, between the two countries, so that none can support an armed rebellion against the other. But now there are other talking points which are suspect that might be on the air. First of all, the issue of drug, because it is known that Bissau is a hub, it's an international hub, for spreading drug coming across the Atlantic from South Africa. It's an international hub, Bissau, and that affects, of course, the neighboring countries like Senegal. Both countries have been fighting against that illicit trade, but we see, I've seen that they might also address that issue. Another issue which is unspoken is the problem of developing the natural resources that are abundant in the sea waters, because along the Atlantic coast, from Mauritania to Guinea-Bissau, you have large deposits of hydrocarbons, whether it be oil or gas. Senegal has been able to strike a deal with Mauritania and now started to produce oil and gas on its frontier with Mauritania. Now, there are oil fields in Senegal, which is called Sangomar, which probably extends to the border with Guinea-Bissau, and there have been discussions between the two countries on the delimitation of the maritime frontier. So Guinea-Bissau expect that he should enter oil production by next year, because last year Guinea-Bissau granted a permit to a Russian company to explore oil in that area. And it's important for President Embalo to have the consent of the Senegalese president, so that there will be no dispute when that Russian company starts to explore oil in Guinea-Bissau waters. It's very, very important to have the consent of the two presidents before they enter production.
I'm wondering,
And the third commodity, which is also discussed, is fishing, because you have fishing permits in the same area, and the permits sometimes overlap the frontier. So on the technical point, I think that the issue of oil and the issue of fishing permits, this one should be on the table between the two presidents, unless they ask technicians to look at those matters at a later point in time.
So, what do you think a stronger tie between Senegal and Guinea-Bissau means for broader relations in the region and West Africa, especially with West Africa's democratic backsliding in several member states, where we've seen some might even call popular coups?
Well, you have the geopolitics. There is some issue of geopolitics here because the President Embalo, he has visited Russia at least 2 times during his presidency. So he has a marked tendency to work with the Russians. Even maybe he is trying to join the BRICS. Whereas Senegal, the new Senegalese government, which is very, very progressive, has yet to declare his intention about Russia and the BRICS. So maybe the two presidents will come together and define a unique course of action with regard to the world geopolitics game. Could be.
All right, so perhaps as a final question, as a former economist yourself, what indicators will you be looking for in the next 6 months to measure whether this visit actually is translated into meaningful progress for both countries?
Bissau has remained a very, very, very poor country relative to Senegal in terms of per capita. In terms of income per capita, in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of its measure into the international trade, and then there are very few crops that are export, and they have very, 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 very low capacity, very, very low capacity in the administration. So, as an indicator, within the 6 months to see the impact of the visit, well, first of all, I would look at the oil deal and the fishing deal. How many accords these two governments have concluded within the 6 months following the visit. How they intend to proceed with regard to development of oil fields and the allocation of fishing permits. These are two documents. These are two areas for me that need concrete action within the next 6 months.
All right, and that's where we'll leave it. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on the program. Your insights greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's former senior United Nations economist Bernard Ouandji speaking to us on the line from Cameroon on this state visit by President Faye of Senegal to neighboring Guinea-Bissau.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Interracial relationships. And now you are based in the States and you are married to a beautiful white woman, white lady.
I learned that, for us in our culture, we literally can speak our mind. I remember when we had started dating and whatnot, and, she picked up like a little bit of weight. And me, I was like, oh, wow, you must be happy in this relationship because look at you. You look great. You're even picking up some weight. And she got really, really offended. And it took like, I think it was about a couple of hours before I could realize that, because I could tell that she was off after that. And it took me a while to figure out like what it was. Until later when I was talking to her, I'm like, you were really, really off today. And then she expressed that, yeah, because you're telling me that I'm picking on some weight. And I'm like, in my culture, when you are gaining some weight, it means you're happy.
Yes.
So that's what I was trying to imply.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
19 minutes past 8 Central African time on Africa Rise and Shine. Let's talk the African Development Bank now. They're meeting in Ivory Coast this week to pick a new president. This at a time when the continent's biggest multilateral lender faces unprecedented challenges from funding cuts by the U.S. government. 5 candidates are running to become president of the lender. The vote for a new president is expected tomorrow. To unpack this, we're joined on the line by businessman, economist, and professor at the Durban University of Technology, Dr. Peter Karungu. Dr. Karungu, thank you for joining us on this Tuesday. Always great catching up with you. How are you today?
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning. Welcome remarks by Dr. Akinwumi A. Adesina, the current president and chairman of the boards of directors of African Development Bank Group. He referred to the meeting as the final chapter of a remarkable decade of transformation. What do you make of this final chapter of a remarkable decade of transformation? Let's start there.
I think let's start by saying the Development Bank of Africa is an institution that for the last 20 years has really done a remarkable job. Access to capital, access to infrastructure. But I like what he said. He had 5 pillars of which he worked along with, one of which was power the continent, feed the continent, integrate the continent, and then bring together what we call development that will be able to industrialize the continent. The achievement of that can be seen in 2 ways. First, since he came in, he has happened to grow the capital asset base from almost 100 billion to over 500 billion in 10 years, if that's the case. And then he has come up with a fund, I believe, that has empowered a lot of people. Where I would have stood him, if I were to be able to see him, there was one pillar he should have included, empower women in the continent. Because to me, until our women have the power to build, they are capable to do as much as men do, we're going to have a lot of issues going forward. But however, I must commend him. His statement is very genuine. His honest is correct. And we cannot afford to work less than double our effort if we have to get this continent where we want it to be.
5 candidates, 81 members, and the countries represented by those candidates are South Africa, Chad, Senegal, Zambia, and Mauritania. As Adesina steps down this September. What percentage of the votes will the winner need to garner to secure the position of president?
I think on average, first of all, they would want to have what we call outright majority, which is okay, or 2/3. That's what people do. But at this stage, it is highly negotiated. And what I don't understand about the continent is, first of all, if you look at it, the last 10 years, the IMF has been run by the bank, by women. First, the central bank governor of Europe, Ms. Kagwad, is a French lady, was the IMF head. Now the current head is also a woman. Why don't African people realize, until we show our children women are equally powerful? All those candidates, I know for sure, they are of excellent academic credentials, have been tested across the board. You can't be fronted into that kind of institution without literally brain and a half. Now that we are seeing a lady who is very qualified, and I'm not saying she should be elected because she comes from South Africa. It should be literally a no bargain. Let's give this lady a chance, because the last president was from Rwanda. Before then, I think, was from West Africa. And we need somebody to say our women need to be given a chance to carry the mission forward.
As we say that, if a woman does lead this time around, her biggest challenge will be tackling the changing global economy after what we're seeing the US President Donald Trump moving towards. So in what ways could she be better suited to approach this global challenge?
First and foremost, I think I come from an economic history. I started in the US in the 1980s when we used to work very hard. There is so much emphasis on giving this man called Mr. President of the United States so much credit. The answer is simple, literally. The world is bigger than an individual, no matter what you see it on. I like what Warren Buffett said. Warren Buffett is 94, one of the richest men in the universe. He said, I quote, "It can't be. We 330 million people could determine the future of 7 billion people going forward. We got to realize that if they do well, we all do well. Failure to do that, we are all going to be able in the same quagmire." That's one. The second aspect is that the continent has the most vibrant youth. The media platform is accelerating growth at supersonic rate. And if you look at it, which is people should always watch, about 25 years ago, this country called China did not count in any equation of economic might. Today, it is predicted in the next 1 decade they will have a higher GDP of 30 trillion against the United States. So what I'm trying to say is that anybody who is sitting somewhere saying development should not worry too much about the cutting of aid. To me, indirectly or directly, I would argue, if somebody says be self-sufficient, it's not insulting you. It's telling you live within your means. And therefore, I'm seeing that as a trigger to mankind to wake up to say dependency on that which is yours may not necessarily be sustainable. And that's basically economic common sense. What I'm saying is we have a World African Development Bank with over 320 billion capital, and it's bound to be able to realize they can squeeze a little bit, redirect their resources differently, and therefore they will be able to come over the cutting that is coming. And that to me would make the lady who comes in to be able to work harder, except there is only one pillar we need to put: empower women and create opportunities for youth in technology.
Let's go back to the point you make. During the 10 years of Adesina's tenure, if you look at the successes achieved, the bank achieved the largest capital increase in its history, raising the capital of the bank from $93 billion to $320 billion. And also the fund you touched on, the African Development Fund, $8.9 billion were raised to replenish that fund there. Firstly, what would you attribute these successes to? And moving forward, what's needed to continue this trajectory?
I think first, we are seeing, despite the challenges, the continent itself growing. And as you have seen over the last 10 years, the African GDP has increased by almost over $500 billion, if not more. That's number one. Number two, technology has become a way of generating wealth indirectly. In other words, I'm saying when you can fast track the productivity, then you create money faster than what used to be a decade earlier. What we always say is that velocity of money in itself generates wealth, and therefore technology has made sure that things are moving very fast. And that the third one is that we have seen our youth growing equally very fast, and the consumption of the youth is also very high. What I'm saying is that there is what we call a ripple effect, or so many factors that worked in his favor. But also, he's a very brilliant man. That may call a spade a spade. If you read his speeches, he has that commitment of passion. He says, this is not a job. Don't come here saying you are looking for a job. This is a mission. It's a calling. It's something that you breathe, you wake up, you think about it. And if the team around him were to think that way, of course, they would be able to achieve faster. But equally important, if I'm not mistaken, his relationship with the bank and IMF has been very relatively amicable, not confrontational, and of course, people have delivered. I think in totality, I summarize what I have seen. It's not easy to raise capital from 93 billion to over 500 billion in 10 years without having a little bit of luck. 3, with factors, like I stated earlier, that have attributed to that.
Let's talk Feeding Africa, which is one of the bank's strategies. How should the bank contribute now to the strategy of Feeding Africa? 104 million people are now food secure because of its efforts. What should the bank be looking at in terms of this particular strategy?
I think the first one, like I said, is collaborate. Is collaborate with institutions, collaborate with the government, and make sure that we have enough resources that we can be able to produce food to feed the whole continent. We need to conserve water. We need to be able to understand that we don't have, although we have enough resources, they are not unlimited. And conservation and making sure that we direct resources to the productivity area will be good. The second one is this African free trade. If we were to trade effectively as we would wish, and goods and services flow without too much bureaucracy, we'll have something in economic we call comparative advantage, in which case we are saying countries like Zambia, who can grow a lot of corn, can be able to grow corn and don't dwell on much else, and let other countries that can grow probably wheat, grow wheat. As long as they are flowing across the board, the boundaries will be able to achieve a higher productivity than otherwise. And then the other one is always to think that what we say in economics, is it possible to specialize even if locally, rather than to have multiplicity of different crops, rather than grow that which we have among ourselves. And then finally is to think about food security. Food security means don't think about today. Don't think about tomorrow. Think about 10 years. On the short term, you can argue, let's feed our people for now, but let's make sure they have food in 3 years.
Right.
Those are the clear thinking that economists are supposed to do and drive and keep on encouraging for people to implement.
Thanks again, Dr. Karungu. We appreciate your time here on Channel Africa.
Thank you so much and have a good day.
You too. Dr. Peter Karungu is businessman, economist, and professor at the Durban University of Technology. Well, all eyes would be on that African Development Bank Group as they look to elect a new leader. I think the announcement will be made on Thursday, voting happening tomorrow. Stay with us on Channel Africa as we give you more coverage on that story. It's 31 minutes past 8. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Jwalani Tulo Mwebe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the leader of the United Democratic Movement in South Africa, General Bantu Holomisa, has called for an investigation into false allegations of genocide against white farmers in South Africa. Holomisa's remarks come after a high-profile meeting between South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump. Ghana's foreign minister has temporarily closed the country's embassy in the U.S. It comes after an investigation uncovered an alleged scam targeting visa and passport applicants. And finally, North Korea has strongly criticized the U.S. plan to build a missile shield, calling it a serious threat that could turn space into a nuclear battleground. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the plan for the so-called Golden Dome defense system last week with the aim to bolster the U.S. defenses. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time now to catch you up with the world of sport. Here's Figile Lingwat.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. We begin with athletics. Let's start off with football first. Kenya Sports Cabinet Secretary, CS Salim Mvurya, has dismissed concerns that Kenya is not ready to host the African Nations Championship CHAN in August this year. The CS says the Confederation of African Football CAF have already given Kenya the thumbs up and everything is a go. Kenya is to co-host the competition, traditionally featuring players from local leagues alongside neighbors Tanzania and Uganda. It was initially scheduled for February this year, but was postponed to August due to the unreadiness of the pitches. His response comes amidst lingering fears over the country's readiness to co-host the continental event with regards to the pitches to be used. Works continue at the Moi International Sports Centre Kasarani and Nyayo Stadium, which have been designated as the two venues that Kenya will use to co-host the tournament. More football news. South African women's football national team, Banyana Banyana, is grateful for the opportunities to play warm-up matches ahead of the defense of its Women's Africa Cup of Nations title in Morocco in July. Previously, there was an outcry from the team over a lack of opportunities ahead of major events. Banyana are in camp in Pretoria preparing for their friendly international matches against Botswana and Zambia over the next week or so. And Captain Refilwe Jane, who just returned from a long injury layoff, says the team is grateful for the warm-up matches.
Over the years, there was a challenge of fully preparing for big tournaments, but this time around things have changed. Thanks to Sasol, thanks to SAFA for helping and making sure that each and every FIFA window we get to play friendly games, we get to play tournaments and things of such. So that gives us, the team, a bit of time to gel in together, gives coaches time to see other players. So with all these games that we keep on getting, we try to build on them so that by the time the tournament comes, we are fully ready.
Coach Desiree Ellis says the warm-up matches will give them an opportunity to test players ahead of the grueling WAFCON tournament in Morocco.
We're more here in testing players and giving players an opportunity, and sometimes when you're doing that, you don't get the result that you want, but it's also about performance, because the performance will bring you the result, because it's all about being ready for WAFCON. That's the really important thing here. If we're ready now, then we have a problem, but it's going to test us, especially with some of the players coming back from injury, also to see where they're at, that have some really good minutes at the clubs, and to see what value they can still add, and with the newer ones coming in, can they raise their hands?
And in Namibia, Sports Minister Sanet Steenkamp has called on Southern African governments to increase investment in athletes' development. Steenkamp was speaking at the 7th Regional Annual Sports Awards in Harare, Zimbabwe this past weekend. Speaking in her capacity as the chairperson of the African Union Sports Council Region 5 Council of Ministers, Steenkamp praised Zimbabwe for its outstanding hospitality and for hosting a truly memorable and exceptional event. Steenkamp urged Region 5 member states to adopt more sustainable frameworks for sport development. She also paid tribute to Zimbabwe's Kirsty Coventry, who was recently elected as the first African and first woman president of the International Olympic Committee. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's find out once again what's happening in the world of business. Here's Nosipho Zuma with economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the World Bank has cut Kenya's growth forecast for this year by 0.5 point from its initial prediction to 4.5%. This as the result of high levels of debt, high lending rates, and a decline in private sector credit. Kenya, which is East Africa's biggest economy, has recorded robust annual growth rates, but high public debt, repayments, economic inequalities, and questions on governance have curbed its performance. Meanwhile, Kenya's financial sector regulators are looking into a proposal that will require fund managers, investment banks and stockbrokers to make full disclosures of their clients whose funds are invested in corporate bonds. The fund managers currently pool together resources from several clients and make investments in corporate bonds as single investments and usually in their name without disclosing the identities of the investors. The regulators say this will ensure bondholders of collapsed or defaulting issuers receive maximum compensation. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, alongside other unions, will today march to the KwaZulu-Natal Province Premier's office in Pietermaritzburg to demand that government stops awarding contracts to non-compliant security companies. The union accuses these companies of defrauding workers by deducting pension and medical aid contributions and not paying it to the service providers, while still securing tenders despite flouting labour regulations. NUMSA National Spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola.
There are thousands of security companies that are defrauding workers, where they deduct money for benefits such as the medical insurance as well as the Provident Fund, but they don't pay that money over to the service provider. And then when workers need to claim those benefits, they are unable to do so because there aren't any funds. And so we are going to hand over a memorandum of demands to the office of the KZN Premier, because we know that they know who some of these rogue security companies are, and we demand that they blacklist them and terminate those contracts.
South Africa's Deputy Public Works Minister Sihle Zikalala says it is satisfying that Treasury is fast-tracking the issue of regulations. He says this will guide how to implement and ensure that the private sector plays a role in funding infrastructure. Zikalala was speaking at the 2025 Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium in Cape Town in the Western Cape Province.
We are happy that the Treasury is fast-tracking the issue of regulations that will guide on how to implement and ensure that the private sector plays a role in funding infrastructure, even the public infrastructure. The ownership will remain with the state. We will want to see private sector investing for a particular time, then hand over to the state. That's how some of the triple Ps work, like build, operate, and transfer. Once there is unsolicited bid, it is always proper to test the market.
And finally, Volvo Cars will cut 3,000 white-collar jobs as part of a restructuring announced last month as it grapples with high costs. The company attributes the cut to a slowdown in electric vehicle demand and trade uncertainty. The layoffs come as the Swedish automaker tries to resurrect its rock-bottom share price and drum up better demand for its cars by restructuring part of its business and cutting costs. Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1 Naira 589. In Botswana, it's 13 Pula 30. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 22. And in Zambia, it's 27 Kwacha 46. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 64. Russia is 79 rubles 41. India is 85 rupees 10. China at 71.19. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 80. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,346 and platinum at $1,081 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $64.53 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom at channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Pozuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
7:45 is our time, Central African. Let's talk obesity and overweight, or people who are overweight, and this health issue or challenge. Health experts say deaths due to obesity-related illnesses are on the rise. They say obesity contributes to non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, and hypertension, amongst others. The World Health Organization says in 2022, 1 in 8 people in the world were living with obesity, and in 2024, 35 million children under the age of 5 were overweight. In South Africa, obesity-related deaths due to non-communicable diseases have surpassed HIV-related deaths, according to the World Health Organization. To discuss this, we are on the line, joined on the line by Petronel Kruger, who is Programs Manager at HEALA. This is a coalition of civil society organizations advocating for equitable access to affordable, nutritious food in South Africa. Petronel, thank you so much for joining us. How are you on this Tuesday?
I am doing wonderfully, and thank you so much for having me so we can talk about this really important issue.
Absolutely, very important, and thanks for making time. Let's get a better understanding in terms of the work done at HEALA, firstly.
Yeah, so the Healthy Living Alliance is an alliance of different civil society organizations, but we also do our own project, which is basically born from a need that we're all seeing in sub-Saharan Africa, which is we're increasingly seeing that local diets are being displaced and being replaced with very unhealthy food. And that's leading to, you were just discussing overweight and obesity and a whole host of other things that's related to being overweight and obese, but also diseases that you can have even if your weight management is still acceptable. So that's related to things like seeing really shockingly increased rates of cancer that we definitely know has a diet-related aspect. We're seeing things like lower fertility rates, which is to do with what we eat. And then, of course, diabetes and high blood pressure is becoming a really big problem. So to give you an example, in South Africa, 1 in 9 people have diabetes, which is a shocking number and very expensive to manage. But, you know, for example, in Kenya, about 40% of almost half of your hospital admissions are because of non-communicable diseases, which basically means diet, tobacco, and alcohol use. So this is becoming a very big concern on the continent. And what we want to advocate for is going back to local diets and reducing the amount of what we call ultra-processed food. So foods that has factory additives, things that you don't find in your kitchen that's making us unhealthy.
How much of this problem can the rise in obesity numbers, how much of it does it speak to a rise in the non-communicable diseases that we cite, or is there more to it?
So the rise of overweight and obesity is a very key contributor to non-communicable diseases. It is not the only one. So as I alluded to, things like tobacco usage, which is quite high on the continent, is a contributor. And also the fact that we're seeing more people living in cities where perhaps safety is an issue and people are having less physical activity. So, you know, it's you can't just go for a run because you're concerned for your safety, especially if you're a woman. So those do contribute, but the World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 4 cases of non-communicable diseases are directly attributed to our diet, which is a very high number, given that 2 out of 3 people now are estimated to die due to non-communicable diseases.
How much of the problem is attributed to genetics?
That's definitely a factor, and that's not something that we can skim over. We've always known that certain people are more prone to picking up weight, are more prone to having a heart disease. So depending on, for example, your social and your ethnic background, you might come from a cultural group that is more prone to retaining salt, for example. So then you're more likely to have hypertension. You might have a sort of a cultural history of heart disease, which is my own background. But that is not the main factor that we see anymore. So it's external factors like diet, like the activities that we engage in, like the pollution in our city, that's becoming increasingly problematic. And we see that because non-communicable diseases have skyrocketed in the last 20 years. And the big change is the fact that people are eating differently. Our genetics have not changed, but our social environments have. And that's why these diseases are picking up.
Let's also differentiate between obesity and being overweight. We probably should have started there before even getting into what the attributing factors are. Firstly, are they that different?
It's on a spectrum. So when we talk about overweight and obesity, we're effectively talking about sort of a medical phenomenon where when measuring, there's multiple ways to measure. The most common way is measuring your height and your weight and doing a very basic formula. And we use that because that's easier at population level to get a big number and to assess trends. But it could also be measuring, the total fat around your middle, or more advanced things where we look, for example, at how much water you have in your body and your fat versus your muscle. But really what we're trying to figure out is how much excess fat do you have as a person in your body, and particularly we're worried about the fat around your organs, your essential organs. So we have what we call an ideal weight, and that is different from each person. And then when you have excess fat, you start moving into overweight territory. And then when we get even more, then we do what we call obesity, and then we have various sort of levels of clinical obesity. I mean, there's definitely some caution to be administered here because we use traditionally what's called the body mass index, which is very Eurocentric, and it's sort of based on the height and the weight level of what you would see a Northern or a European to be. However, BMI is very helpful in all contexts to assess trends. And that's something that we can see, even if it is skewed in one direction, the fact that people are picking up more weight in all population areas is a concern.
Talking of BMI being more of a Eurocentric measure, in certain African cultures, there's this perception that weight is a symbol of wealth or of being happy. How does this perpetuate the problem of obesity on our continent?
Yeah, it's a well-established phenomenon. Various studies in East Africa specifically have shown this. We definitely see it in Southern Africa as well. One of the big issues that we have with that is that it makes it very difficult to actually inform people to have sort of family dietary changes because, you're slightly pudgier, maybe especially there's, a specific a sense of success and wealth. If you have a bigger tummy, that might mean you eat well, and for whatever reasons, we perceive that to be good, and that's essentially where we're worried about the weight gain. So that is a barrier. It's also, in the continent where we have a very high HIV and AIDS rates, and where traditionally before we had effective medical interventions, we saw that one of the first things that were picked up when people didn't have access to medical care is that they would start drastically losing weight. So you also have that negative association with being thinner, and then sort of this fear that might be an indicator that you're getting sick. And that's also something that we're struggling with in communities. But overall, there seems to be an increase in sort of health literacy on this issue. We're seeing families more and more moving towards understanding that actually being able to access a healthy diet is becoming a status symbol. We still have a lot of ways to work towards to make sure that we understand that health is in fact the true wealth, but it is still a social barrier that we need to tackle.
Yeah, the figures are that 35 million children under the age of 5 are overweight. What psychosocial consequences does childhood and adolescent obesity have?
Yeah, so those figures say two worrying things to me. The first one is that actually those overweight and obesity rates are closely linked to stunting, which is actually child malnutrition and underfeeding, because the children very early on don't get access to enough food. Their metabolic processes change. Their bodies are prone to store energy because the body is effectively in a fight or flight mode, so worried that there's going to be continued starvation. And those children then retain more weight, and then that's when we see that we have high rates of overweight and obesity. So it's often a sign actually of hunger in the area. But the big concern we also then have is that, especially at such a young age, the likelihood of then being an adult who has quote unquote normal weights, I use that word with an asterisk there, but is very little. There's various studies that show unless there's medicinal intervention, it's incredibly difficult for someone to change their weight profile positively, so to reduce the weight loss. We sort of all anecdotally know that from how difficult it is to go on a diet. So those children are becoming increasingly sick at an earlier age and very likely to have non-communicable diseases. And I think something we need to flag is that childhood diabetes is becoming a very big problem. And it used to only be that we saw type 1 diabetes, which is the genetic type in children. And we're now seeing type 2 diabetes, which is the one we used to associate with elderly people and, people maybe 50 and above who was prone to diabetes. Now it's becoming more prevalent at a younger age. Very worrying.
Psychosocial consequences and also even social consequences. I mean, these are school-going age individuals. They need to be involved in sports in some cases. They have play dates. They need to be outside playing and all of that. How does that get affected in terms of how they now see themselves, these children who are struggling with obesity?
Yeah, that's a very big behind sort of the perception in young women of weight gain, sense of their own body is particularly higher, and then social media, which is showing trends of showing thinner and thinner role models, and at this rate artificially, so where we have AI models, which makes it literally impossible to achieve that at body weight, has actually shown to lead to increases in childhood suicide. And there's a court case, a class action actually against Meta ongoing, because it's shown that there's like algorithms that actively encourage sort of hate clicks and hate watching videos, where we're encouraging young children to try and achieve these ridiculous goals for themselves, which includes body goals, in an area where you'll show a child a video of someone who's incredibly skinny, and then at the same time we also know that ultra-processed food companies specifically target children as a growth market. So showing a child a very skinny person, and then after that you're showing a child an advertisement for a fast food burger. It's making it increasingly difficult for children to cope, and we're seeing a lot of increase in childhood anxiety. A recent statistic showed that in the United States, children are experiencing the same rate of PTSD as what military veterans in the 1980s had. And we need to start asking ourselves serious questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to leave it there for now. Petronelle, thank you so much for joining us. A very important topic indeed.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Petronelle Kruger is a programs manager at HEALA, and HEALA is a group of civil society organizations advocating for equitable access to affordable, nutritious food in South Africa, talking of the challenge of obesity. Well, coming up after Africa Rise and Shine is On the Move with Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau, who is joining us to tell us what we can expect. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you guys?
Yeah,
good, thank you.
And what are we moving with?
All right. So today we're going to be unpacking the complexity of estrangement with family. So having estranged families,
sometimes.
Yeah, and it's, it's not an easy thing, and there comes a point when, if that happens, something huge must be happening. Sometimes generational trauma and things that have been unfixed for many, many years. So what happens in circumstances of family estrangement? We're speaking to clinical psychologist Trifosa Siweya, helping us explore what it actually means, the silent pain that often precedes it, and how individuals can begin the healing process after being estranged from their family members. Then we go in the cubicle, taking a look at the world of work. And today we're speaking about how a lot of workers on the African continent don't work in the office, right? We're speaking about security guards, fast food workers, etc. But HR principles and systems are managed and, as if people are working in the office. So we'll be speaking to South African startup called Gem HR, and they're calling for HR and finance leaders to rethink benefit accessibility and design systems for real workers in the continent. So we're going to be looking at what those systems actually look like and how they should be adjusting to what the workforce actually looks like on the continent. And then we go into our Money Matters feature. Most of us have like Wi-Fi in our homes now, and what that has skyrocketed is our subscription. So from entertainment, social media, we subscribe to so many things. And Standard Bank, which is a bank in South Africa, is showing data that subscription spending in South Africa has risen sharply, and it's eating into our disposable income. Okay. So how do we fix that? How many things are you subscribed to? I say a lot, I know, especially when it comes to home entertainment.
And also, the thing is, individually, it's not a lot of money.
No.
But
all together. Because one is like 59 Rand, and the other one is like 600, and the other one is 70 Rand for a music thing. But all together, it adds up.
I'm fascinated by this estrangement thing, because a theme that's quite common, sadly, is one parent, usually the father, child gets born, dad disappears. And then they come back 20
years later
and want to insert themselves. I don't know how one deals with that. It's such a... And then sometimes a beef goes on for so long, you've forgotten why you were upset in the first place.
Even siblings. I mean, sibling rivalry sometimes takes so long that the children don't know each other, and everyone is just living their separate lives. But it takes these small things added up to create that environment.
Well, that's On the Move. Stay tuned to Channel Africa for that. Right now, though, it's goodbye from me, Asanda Beta.
I'm me, Peter Ndoro, and it's time for your news. Here's Jwalani Tulo Ngwete.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Top stories this hour: a call for an investigation into false allegations of genocide against white farmers in South Africa, and North Korea strongly criticized the US's plans to build a missile shield. Good morning. The leader of the United Democratic Movement in South Africa, General Bantu Holomisa, has called for an investigation into false allegations of genocide against white farmers in South Africa. Holomisa's remarks come after a high-profile meeting between South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and his US counterpart Donald Trump. In the meeting, which was held last Wednesday, Trump raised concerns about alleged attacks on white